Well, joining me now is Massachusetts Congressman Jake Auchincloss. Congressman, always good to talk with you, so let's get into this, because officials say that both Hamas and Israel, they had shown signs of compromise in recent days. This current proposal, from which Hamas has now left Cairo and heading back to brief their leadership, it included 2 6-week troop withdrawal and hostage release phases that negotiators hope will prevent a Rafah invasion. But then you have today Prime Minister Netanyahu rejecting Hamas's demands for a total end of the war. Let's take a listen to a little bit of what he said. Here it is.
כניעה לדרישות החמאס תהיה תבוסה איומה למדינת ישראל. זה יהיה ניצחון עצום לחמאס, לאיראן, לכל ציר הרשע. זה יקרין חולשה נוראה, גם לידידינו וגם לאויבינו. והחולשה הזאת רק תקרב את המלחמה הבאה, והיא תרחיק את הסכם השלום הבא. כי בריתות לא קורטים עם החלש והמובס, בריתות קורטים עם החזק והמנצח. לכן ישראל לא תסכים לדרישות החמאס שמשמעותן כניעה, והיא תמשיך את הלחימה עד השגת כל מטרותיה.
So what happens now? Is Netanyahu, is he stalling for a better deal for Israel, or does he seem really undeterred to ending this war until Hamas is eradicated? Something he has said from the very beginning.
This deal is acceptable, and Israel is genuine in wanting to pursue it, as it was back in December when an iteration of this deal was first on the table, thanks to the work of Joe Biden. But it's not a fair deal. Let's be clear, Alex. A fair deal would be that all of these hostages, including women and children and the elderly and Americans, were unconditionally released by a terrorist organization that took them on an attack that included rape, torture, and murder. Israel's negotiating with terrorists, and when that happens, there are going to be unreasonable and immoral demands made, and Netanyahu is drawing a line. He cannot guarantee to permanently end this conflict for the very simple reason that if he unilaterally declares a ceasefire, Hamas will violate it and the war will renew. That's not my opinion. Hamas has done that half a dozen times before that. Hamas did that on October 7th. Hamas has assured the world that it will do that again. The only way to have permanent peace, economic development, and the provision of basic services in the Gaza Strip is for Hamas to be excluded from political governance going forward. And that is really the core of the disagreement, is that Hamas obviously doesn't want to agree to that.
Okay, let's move to the ongoing protests against the war on the college campuses, some of which, as you know, have been violent, particularly when police have been called in to remove encampments. Give me a grade that you want to give schools for their handling of the right to free speech and expression, along with campus safety.
And their Title VI obligations to create a suitable learning environment for all students. There's no one grade to give universities because the response has been so disparate. So, for example, here in Massachusetts, Brandeis has responded superbly. Harvard, MIT, Northeastern, UMass Amherst have responded very poorly. Outside of Massachusetts, University of Chicago, Princeton, Dartmouth have responded well with strong leadership. UCLA, abysmally. It's important to note that if these protesters' demands were met by the president, these hostages would be doomed to die in captivity because Israel would be ceding its leverage. Now, these protests are not monolith, obviously, and different protesters have different points of view. But the overall character of these protests, Alex, is in fact anti-Semitic and pro-terrorist. And Democrats need to roundly condemn them. We cannot be worried about the electoral impact of so doing. We've got to do what's right, not what's politic. And frankly, the margin of victory for Joe Biden is not going to be college students in California anyway. It's going to be Nikki Haley voters in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania who probably don't have a lot of sympathy for overprivileged, underinformed kids on Ivy League campuses.
You know, the rise in anti-Semitic incidents on some campuses, that has left many Jewish students afraid for their safety. Give me a sense of how well colleges are addressing those concerns. And is it complicated by Jewish students who at the same time are showing empathy for Palestinians in Gaza?
I spent a couple days ago the full afternoon on Harvard's campus meeting with Jewish and Israeli students. And what I heard from them, including, by the way, Alex, students who are deeply sympathetic to some of the demands being made by protesters who are deeply anti-Netanyahu themselves, what I heard from them was a fact pattern of of disparate treatment, particularly for the Israeli students, and a hostile learning environment. Young Jewish students, particularly progressive students, are excluded from spaces of academia and activism and sociality because of who they are and because of their Zionist beliefs. That is a Title VI violation. And not just university leadership, but university board members need to be liable for those infractions.
Okay, we're going to switch gears and talk right now about what's happening this week in Congress with Marjorie Taylor Greene expected to follow through on her motion to vacate Speaker Mike Johnson. But then standing in her way are some Republicans and Democrats pledging to defend Johnson. Is this a good move for Democrats? An argument could be made for just letting Republicans fight and put their dysfunction and chaos on full display.
I'll be one of those Democrats voting to table the motion and defend Mike Johnson. This is now the third time in 18 months that House Republicans have been consumed by infighting and dysfunction. I think the point has been made to the American people when you contrast that with the 117th Congress 2 years ago. At this time in that Congress, Democrats were debating, how do we empower Medicare to negotiate drug prices? How do we invest in infrastructure? How do we get health care for veterans? How do we pass bipartisan gun safety legislation? One of the most productive Congresses in modern history. This time around, it's been just zigzagging from one clown show to the next. Mike Johnson, while I disagree with him on most political issues, did not lie, and he ultimately did stand up to his extreme MAGA wing and voted to govern and support our Democratic allies. He should not then be booted from power and in a manner that would actually platform and amplify Marjorie Taylor Greene's extreme beliefs.
Okay. Congressman Jake Auchincloss, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.